Good afternoon and welcome to episode 34 of the Life and Spirit podcast. And today we're going to be covering chapter 20 of the book of Matthew. And I'm particularly excited about this particular podcast because in our last podcast we ended up chapter 19 by reading the verse 20, which was the last verse in chapter 19 of the book of Matthew, which stated that many who are first will be last, and last will be first. And so that kind of led up to and sets up this chapter 20 reading, and that's what we're going to be doing today. And the chapter 20 reading starts with verse 1. I'm reading it from my NIV version on my phone today, but the heading of this chapter, or this section of the chapter, is Vineyard. And I'm going to go ahead and start reading. And so it reads, "For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire workers for his vineyard. He agreed to pay them a denarius for the day and sent them into the vineyard. About 9 in the morning he went out and he saw others standing in the marketplace doing nothing. He told them, 'You also go work in my vineyard, and I will pay you whatever is right.' So they went. He went out again about noon and about 3 in the afternoon and did the same thing about 5 in the afternoon. He went out and found still others standing around. He asked them, 'Why have you been standing here all day doing nothing?' And they responded, 'Because no one has hired us,' they answered. He said to them, 'You also go and work in my vineyard.' When evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to the foreman, 'Call the workers and pay them their wages, beginning with the last ones hired and going on to the first.' The workers who were hired about 5 in the afternoon came and each received a denarius. So when those came who were hired first, they expected to receive more, but each one of them also received a denarius. When they received it, they began to grumble against the landowner. Those who were hired last worked only 1 hour, they said, 'and you have made them equal to us, who have borne the burden of the work and the heat of the day.' But he answered one of them, 'I am not being unfair to you, friend. Didn't you agree to work for a denarius? Take your pay and go. I want to give the one who was hired last the same as I gave you. Don't I have the right to do what I want with my own money? Or are you envious because I am generous? So the last will be first, and the first will be last.'" And that kind of sets up what I had said earlier about being excited about studying this chapter, because it was set up so well with verse 20 of chapter 19. And of course, I'm going to look at this initially as it is read, and as a landowner who hires workers, and kind of talk about that from that perspective first. And so he went out first thing in the morning. You can kind of envision it must have been very early in the morning, and he found men that were available to work in his vineyard. And he arranged with them that he would pay them the going daily rate, which was a denarius. and then he he actually sent them out in the into the vineyard, and they began working. And the next group of people that he encountered at 9 o'clock, he told them that he would pay what is right. And I think that since they had already gone 3 hours and they hadn't started working, they decided to kind of trust him, and that he would pay what is right. They probably were thinking that it would be kind of a day's wage, maybe minus the hours that they were waiting to be hired. And so and then of course at noon he did the same thing, and he found workers who were available, as well as 3 o'clock and 5 o'clock. 5 o'clock was 1 hour before the Labor Day was ended, and those workers they worked an hour, and afterwards the landowner said to his foreman that I want you to pay the workers, pay the men that I sent out in the vineyard last first, and so on and then eventually get to the people that were hired first thing in the morning. And so he paid the workers that were actually hired at 5 o'clock a denarius. The same thing with the workers who he hired at 3 and at 12. And so the workers that were hired first and also received a denarius, they probably thought they were going to be receiving more because they maybe were aware of the fact of what he paid the last workers. But no, he paid them what they had agreed to. A day's wage which was set at a denarius in those days. And so they grumbled, and they were unhappy because they compared their situation, working all day in the sun and the toil of the work, and they felt it was unfair, and they were grumbling. And the landowner actually confronted them and said that because he was doing something good, were they really justified to have an evil eye? And that is kind of paraphrasing what he said, but in those days, somebody having an evil eye, that would actually be a person that engaged in jealousy, a person that had contempt for others that they felt were being treated better than they were, and so that jealousy that they had, the fact that they felt that they were going to be receiving more than they actually did in the end receive, that the landowner would have certainly viewed that as those laborers were having an evil eye. And of course, this story of the landowner and the workers is a parable, if you will, that certainly it's analogous to the fact that the Jewish, the children of Israel, the Jewish people of that day, and we'll just refer to the Jewish men of that day, just to kind of more personalize it. The Jewish men of that day, they did not like the fact that Jesus was offering redemption and salvation to tax collectors and to sinners. They, again, that analogy, taking that, comparing it to the landowner and the workers, they felt like they had been obeying the law. They looked at themselves as being, quite, self-righteous. They looked at themselves as being righteous. They were indeed self-righteous, and they looked at the tax collectors and the sinners as not actually toiling in the noonday sun. Again, that's an analogy, but they felt like they were, kind of the Johnny-come-latelys, and it didn't seem fair to them that Jesus was offering them redemption and offering them salvation, ultimate salvation, the same as he was offering them. And so there was that evil eye, you might say, that some that chose to not accept Jesus as the Son of God, to not actually repent. They part of that may have been the fact that they really were jealous of the fact that the tax collectors and the sinners were being that Jesus was having meals and socializing with them, and he was offering them redemption and salvation, and they may have felt that was unfair. And of course, if we take that even further, that would, the fact that prophecy spoke of the fact that Gentiles would also be provided with redemption and salvation. They would have really, not necessarily thought that was fair, and it may have affected their unwillingness to repent. And so there was, that undercurrent of that was going on while Jesus was ministering over those 3-year period, and the people that came to his preaching and his teaching and his healings and his casting out demons, and people that actually experienced his ministry. There may have been that could have been an obstacle if they hardened their heart because they felt like it wasn't fair that tax collectors and sinners were being offered repentance and the forgiveness of sin and salvation the same as they were, and they felt like they had been obeying the Jewish law, for a period of time, and so they just felt like that was unfair when they compared their situation to what they viewed as sinners and tax collectors, and certainly with Gentiles that really kind of enraged people that maybe were prone to have a kind of a jealous heart to begin with. And so that was the first section that we read here in chapter 20. And so the next section that I'll be reading is actually that Jesus foretells his death and a third time. And so I'm going to be reading that from the actually my app, so it is the NIV version. But the heading is, Jesus predicts his death a third time, and it reads, Now Jesus was going up to Jerusalem. On the way, he took the 12 aside, and he said to them, We are going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be delivered over to the chief priests and the teachers of the law. They will condemn him to death and will hand him over to the Gentiles to be mocked and flogged and crucified. On the third day, he will be raised to life. And so that was the second kind of section of this chapter 20 that I just read. And so this is actually is referred to as the third passion. It is certainly a more detailed description of what was going to happen to Jesus in Jerusalem. Much more it was more detailed than the first and the second passion that he actually told that he actually spoke to the disciples about. He talked in this third passion about the fact that he would be condemned by the Jewish leaders, and those Jewish leaders being certainly the high priest would be and the Sadducees and the Pharisees, and they would condemn him, and so he told them about that. He like in the second passion, he said that he would be handed over, but here he said he was going to be handed over to the Gentiles, and so that is actually a more descriptive description of what was going to be happening to him in Jerusalem. And he said that he would be mocked, and he was going to be certainly flogged and mistreated, and then he would be crucified. And this is the very first time that he actually referred to his manner of death as being that he would be crucified. And so that is certainly an important detail that he shared with the disciples in the third passion that he described. And then lastly, that after 3 days he would be resurrected. And so that was the third passion. That was the second portion of the chapter 20 dealt with the third passion and his description of what was going to be happening to him, that he would be crucified, and on the third day he would be resurrected. And so that was something that was very new. There was a new level of detail that he shared with the disciples before entering Jerusalem. And then the next section is entitled here in my NIV, A Mother's Request. And it reads, Then the mother of Zebedee's sons came to Jesus with her sons, and kneeling down, asked a favor of him. What is it you want? He asked. She said, Grant that one of these 2 sons of mine may sit at your right hand, or right, and the other at your left in your kingdom. You don't know what you are asking, Jesus said to them. Can you drink the cup I am going to drink? And now the disciples that she was referring to said, We can, they answered. Jesus said to them, You will indeed drink from my cup, but to sit at my right or left is not for me to grant. These places belong to those for whom they have been prepared by the Father, or by my Father. When the 10 heard about this, they were indignant with the 2 brothers. Jesus called them together and said, You know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to be great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be your slave. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. And of course, that last part is a ransom of to many. That was directly a prophecy of the prophet Isaiah that was written over 700 years before this particular exchange between Jesus and the disciples. But it certainly is interesting that this third section of chapter 20, we see the inner circle, if you will. We see 2/3 of the inner circle, James and John, and they're the ones that the mother is referring to, the sons of Zebedee, James and John. So they are the 2/3 of the inner circle. The inner circle I referred to in an earlier podcast, where they were the ones that Jesus chose to actually witness the transfiguration along with Peter, and those were his inner circle. His you could say that there's certainly evidence to the fact that they were very close and trusted disciples, that he actually did give those special honors, or he really showed a great deal of trust on occasion, and so 2/3 of that group of the inner circle, again, James and John, basically those are the two men that the mother is referring to and Jesus responded to, and of course the request was to sit at that once he was once he was seated in his throne in heaven, that these two sons of hers, and now he of course was directing his speech to those disciples, that they wanted to sit at his left and to his right, and in these seats of great honor. And then Jesus asked them the question. He asked, "Would you be willing to drink from the cup that he drinks from?" And without maybe giving it that much thought, they kind of impetuously, you might say, responded that they would. And so that was something that Jesus took in. He didn't rebuke them for saying that. He took that in, and he basically told them that those seats that they are asking to occupy to his left and to his right in the kingdom of heaven, that those seats have been prepared by the Father. Those are not seats that he would be giving them, but it's the Father who prepared those seats for them. And so the Father, of course, who is outside of time, he is certainly Father God operates outside of time, and so those seats may have already been prepared for the people that would be sitting in those seats of honor. That it wouldn't be that was not for Jesus to give, and so and then he actually speaks to the disciples, and he said that whoever wants to be great, that they need to be a servant to all, and whoever wants to be the greatest needs to be a slave. And then he refers to his mission, and which of course is was fulfilling prophecy as being a mission where his life was being that he was giving his life. The Son of Man was giving his life as a ransom for many, and so he wasn't on his mission and to be served or to be honored. He was on his mission to serve and certainly to give his life as a ransom for many was the way that this section ended. And so I think that he has once again kind of turned maybe the expectations of the disciples kind of upside down, where they may have thought that because they were in a very important position, and they served him and they followed him, that they warranted those seats to his left and right in the kingdom of heaven. Jesus, of course, let them know that it wasn't for him to assign those seats. It was the Father in heaven that that has already prepared those and who would be sitting in them. But he also turned their expectations upside down, that it's not that the person who wants to be greatest in the kingdom of heaven, and he modeled this, would be the person who would be the servant to all, and even more so be the slave to all, or in his case, giving his life to on the cross as a ransom for many. And so that's the way that third section of this chapter ended. And then the last section is actually the last section is it? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm going to read that. Actually, the last section is entitled "Two Blind Men Receive Sight," and it actually starts out. I'm going to be reading starting with verse 29. And so, as Jesus and the disciples were leaving Jericho, a large crowd followed him. Two blind men were sitting by the roadside, and when they heard that Jesus was going by, they shouted, "Lord, Son of David, have mercy on us." The crowd rebuked them and told them to be quiet. But they shouted all the louder, "Lord, Son of David, have mercy on us." Jesus stopped and called them. "What do you want me to do for you?" he asked. "Lord," they answered, "we want our sight." Jesus had compassion on them and touched their eyes. Immediately they received their sight and they followed him. And that is such an interesting way to end this section, that he had compassion on these men. He touched their eyes, and their sight, they suddenly could see clearly. And they were very thankful and grateful and humble, and from that point forward, they became followers of Jesus. And so that is just a really interesting section of this chapter. We hear once again where they referred to Jesus as the Son of David. That's a title of great respect. They recognized that Jesus was the Son of the living God, and they used the title the Son of David. And so certainly that was something that showed that they recognized who Jesus was, what he could do. They asked Jesus to have mercy, but it bears, certainly mentioning that they referred to him as the Son of David, as others had in earlier healing stories, where others had referred to Jesus as the Son of David. They showed him, certainly great respect, and they showed humility, and then Jesus asked those two blind men what they wanted, and they responded by by saying they wanted to have their sight returned to them. And it's so interesting to compare this last section of chapter 20 with the previous section where Jesus asked disciple James and John what they wanted, and they of course responded that they wanted to sit in these seats of honor in heaven, to his left and to his right. And just to make a reference to that section, he also, of course, he told them that was for the Father to decide who'd be sitting in those seats. But he did say to James and John, and this is Jesus actually speaking in prophecy, one might say, that they would indeed drink from the cup that he drank from, and that he said that to James and John. We do know that ultimately James would be the very first disciple to actually die by died by sword, and he was the first martyr for Jesus after his resurrection. And so that was James. And we do know that John certainly faced a great deal of persecution in his life. He lived the longest of all the disciples. He didn't actually die. He wasn't martyred, but he did die on the island of Pathos, I believe it is pronounced, and he definitely suffered a lot of persecution. So he drank from that cup of suffering that Jesus drank from. And so the prophecy that Jesus shared with them certainly came true. But and now we're thinking in terms of the fact that Jesus asked the same question to these two blind men of what they wanted. They very humbly they asked him to have mercy on them and to return their sight, of which he did after showing compassion to them. He returned. He was able to touch their eyes, and they were able to see. And they became followers from that point on. And so that is just a great way to kind of end this section. And I say that we end this section, and certainly we have with the healing of these two blind men who showed such humility and certainly such respect, and who had faith and immediately became followers of Jesus. And so that does conclude chapter 20. And we're going to be in our next podcast, episode 35, we're going to be getting into chapter 21. And I'm already looking forward to that podcast. But that podcast really covers his triumphal entry into Jerusalem on the colt of a donkey, and so that is how this chapter ends. But it kind of sets up the fact that Jesus is now going to be entering Jerusalem. He's going to enter in a triumphal, I should say, entry. And so that's what we'll be covering in our next Life and Spirit podcast. I just cannot thank you enough for taking the time to watch and to listen to this podcast. Certainly to take in the information contained in chapter 20 of the book of Matthew. I always marvel at just the living word, and it just like every time we get into the living word, we really gain some new insight and something new and fresh is gained from it. I hope you actually did take something new and fresh away from this podcast. I enjoyed covering this chapter with you, and welcome any comments or questions you might have. But until we meet again, which again will be chapter 21 of the book of Matthew, God bless you. God bless your families. I wish you the very, very best, and blessings to you, and I will see you soon.